The crash wasn't loud. It was cruel. Eli didn't remember the fall, only the silence that came after. A sudden void, as if the world had folded in on itself. The scout vessel, Trident 7, had been mid-course, skimming across a dead stretch of a mineral moon on the edge of Threnari space. Routine mapping. Not even exciting. Then, in the middle of a data packet to command, the hull lurched. 1/2 second of warning from the AI, gyro failure detected, and then, the cold slap of gravity flipped everything upside down. When he came to, he was wedged sideways in the crumpled cockpit, visor fogged, his right arm numb, his left side screaming. The cracked screen showed red pressure warnings, a flickering pulse line, and in the corner, a soft, blinking SOS at the edge of the screen, like it was apologizing. He tried to move. Couldn't. His shoulder was wrong, dislocated, and pulled high like it was trying to escape his own body. Breathing hurt. Deeply. Every inhale snagged something inside his chest like broken glass. But he was alive. At least, until his suit's oxygen tank began chirping at 23%. The Threnari found him 3 hours later. They descended with clinical grace, tall, angular beings in scaled gray med uniforms, eyes like glacial pearls, and fingers too long for comfort. The Consortium Rapid Response Metacraft hovered silently overhead, a lattice of blue light lifting debris around the wreckage. Their voices hummed in some soft harmonic Eli's ears, didn't translate right away. He faded in and out during extraction, the pain dulling his thoughts, his words slurred as he tried to tell them about the shoulder. And the lung. Left side can't breathe right. Heartbeat irregular, one Threnari said, her voice hushed and serious. There is a failure of rhythm. It ceases. No, it's sinus normal, I think, he mumbled. Then, unconsciousness. What happened next would be reported in at least 3 consortium medical journals, under temporal discontinuity in primitive bipedal organics. Inside the sterile medbay, beneath soft amber lights and misting oxygen domes, the Threnari stood over Eli like astronomers over a black hole. Their own physiology was marked by unbroken biocycles, continuous heart patterns, rhythmic enzyme pulses, stable neural oscillations. Their pulse monitors didn't tick. They sang a steady note in harmony. But Eli's heart? Thump. Silence. Thump. Silence again. 4 seconds between beats. Time is stopping inside him, one whispered. Neurologist Kalix Sen, the highest authority on biotemporal continuity aboard the Metacraft Doran, stared at the readouts with genuine horror. This organism exists between temporal intervals, she said. The anomaly is internal, a fracture in causality. Can he survive this? Unclear. He may already be dead in microbursts. The intervals, they are silent, unmeasurable. A junior medic attempted to place a diagnostic band around Eli's wrist. The sensor flared red. His oxygen levels fluctuated not from external trauma, but from erratic stress waves. His blood pressure dipped, then spiked. His temperature pulsed unevenly. His heart thump-thump remained obstinately chaotic. Kalix Sen leaned forward. He is adrift in time. Their attempt to restart his internal clock began with caution. A microdose of chronal aligners, a substance used to recalibrate the heart matrices of Threnari under acute arrhythmic failure. It targeted neurocardiac centers, delivering a bioelectric prompt designed to remind the heart how to maintain harmonic continuity. To Eli's human physiology, it was an adrenaline spike. He woke hard. Not groggy, not gently. He snapped upright, gasping and wild-eyed, one arm swinging. He tore the oxygen hood off with his good hand, elbow slamming into a tray that clattered metal across the floor. His dislocated shoulder screamed, and he screamed with it. The Threnari recoiled. To them, it was not a pain response. It was a reactionary phase breach. His vital signs flared into incomprehensible waves, heart rate surging to 160 BPM, oxygen spiking, pupils dilating. He's rupturing the interval, Kalix shouted. 2 medics lunged with temporal dampeners. Eli, still delirious, saw shadows and spikes of blue light. "Don't touch me!" He choked, voice half air, half panic. The restraint gel snapped across his chest, pinning him to the med table. His head swam. He couldn't inhale deeply, the bruised lung crushed anything beyond shallow sips. Each breath was a war. He tried to explain something about just a panic attack, but the translation bot lagged by several seconds. Heart races when scared, he whispered. The bot translated, internal chronodrive has lost equilibrium due to external sensory distortion, which didn't help. The Threnari read his cardiac rhythm like a doomsday clock. Irregular, impossible. Your concept of time is fractured, Calyx told him, a soft sadness in her voice. We cannot find continuity. Your heart forgets to beat. The first 72 hours were a mess of confusion. Eli was heavily sedated, not unconscious, but dulled, hovering in that foggy nowhere between pain and comprehension. He understood, dimly, that they were watching him. He heard them counting. 1, pause, 2, pause. Why does time stop between them? He would have laughed if it didn't hurt to breathe. His left lung was bruised but not collapsed. Several ribs were cracked. The dislocated shoulder had been realigned with gentle traction, but it would take weeks to rebuild strength. The painkillers helped, but movement was slow, sleep was broken, and lying flat made him feel like he was drowning. Each day, a new Threnari arrived with something to measure. Calyx returned with her neurometrics probe and asked again, "Do you remember the silence between beats?" Eli blinked. It's just how it works. But the gaps. Time halts. Are you aware? It doesn't halt, it's just a pause. A what? He tried. You know how rain doesn't fall constantly? It comes in drops. That's what a heartbeat is. There was silence in the room. One assistant, barely out of his training plumage, whispered, "So between each drop of rain, the sky is empty of time?" Eli sighed. "Sure, fine, that's exactly it." The assistant returned the next day with a water timer and an existential crisis. By the end of the first week, Eli was stable enough to sit up with assistance. Physical therapy began slowly, breathing drills first. The bruised lung made deep inhales sharp, so the therapist, a Threnari named Meliar, guided him through quiet, shallow expansions, counting softly. 1, 2, 3, hold. Again. His shoulder remained partially immobilized, arm strapped across his chest. The joint throbbed constantly, and any wrong movement made the pain flash behind his eyes. Progress was measured in millimeters. They fed him mild broth, gave him hydration packets that tasted like crushed mint in glass, and observed him like he was a dream threatening to wake. Every few hours, someone charted his vitals. Still thump. Pause. Thump. They whispered about it in hallways. Calyx had already drafted a theory that humans existed in pulsed chronology, a species adapted to the rhythm of uncertainty, a neurologist's nightmare, a philosopher's muse. She presented it to the medical team with a visual: Eli's ECG next to a Threnari's, a river versus a heartbeat, smooth flow versus broken intervals. The human form, she said reverently, walks through time the way one might hop across stones in a stream, always between, never submerged. Back in bed, Eli dozed, mildly sedated again. Someone asked him later what he thought of Calyx's theory. He snorted, lips dry. "I'm just stressed," he said, "and probably still full of caffeine from the last time I slept." The bot translated, "I am powered by chaos and stimulants." Melior stared at him in awe. It wasn't reverence Eli wanted. He just wanted a good night's sleep, a shoulder that didn't feel like fire, and a way to explain that heartbeats had always come with silence. He wasn't broken, he was just human. But, for the Threnari, that might have been the strangest thing of all. Melior insisted Eli walk. 3 steps first, then 6. Every movement sent dull aches through his shoulder and ribcage, but Melior was patient, too patient, like she was unsure if he'd continue existing between footsteps. They'd fitted him with a thin exo-support wrap across his chest to compress the ribcage and ease strain on the lung. A sling held his injured arm close. He looked, in his own words, like a lopsided baked potato with legs. "What are you looking at?" he rasped one morning, catching Calyx watching from the medbay observation glass. "Your time flow stabilizes with motion," she replied, blinking slowly. "I'm walking, not time traveling." Melior scribbled that down as a quote. The worst part wasn't the pain, it was the waiting. Eli hated being watched. He hated the pause before every question the Threnari asked, the wide-eyed stares each time his heart dared to take a beat's worth of rest. He couldn't laugh, it hurt too much, but he wanted to. They meant well. That was clear enough. but watching them tiptoe around his biology like it might tear open space was maddening. The intern, the one with the water timer, became a regular visitor. His name was Kisht. "I believe you are a harmonic glitch," Kisht said once, sitting cross-legged near Eli's medbed, data slate in hand. "I'm a pilot," Eli replied. "Yes, a profession that travels between causal anchors. It fits." "No, I mean I fly ships, real slow ones, not time machines." Kish nodded solemnly, ignoring him entirely. "You mentioned something called coffee. Is this your species' stabilizer?" Eli blinked. "Stimulant. Liquid chaos. It doesn't stabilize anything, it just makes mornings survivable." "May I see it?" "I'm stranded on a medship. Do you think I brought a Starbucks?" Kish looked confused. Eli sighed. "Forget it." But the next day, a sealed vial appeared beside his food tray. The label, according to the translation band, read, "Simulated Caphonic Brew Compound, Harmonic Wakefulness Trial 01." It tasted like melted circuit board and regret. Week 2 brought improvement. The bruised lung had nearly cleared. He could breathe more deeply without triggering a coughing fit. The cracked ribs remained sore. He moved like a stiff marionette, but the swelling in his shoulder was down. Still, no lifting, no climbing, no strain. Melior kept him honest. Each session, she watched his breath, his posture, his effort. Each session, someone recorded his heart. He began joking that they weren't treating him, they were writing a horror novel about him. "They act like, if I skip a beat, the galaxy folds in on itself," he told Meliar after one long walk around the circular medbay hall. She didn't smile. Threnari didn't smile. They just shimmered lightly, their skin brightening at the edges in emotion. "We do not understand how your species persists with such instability. We call it being alive." Calix's research became more public. A paper circulated among consortium medships. Temporal fragmentation in organic bipedals. The human cardiac paradox. It included real-time vitals from Eli's telemetry, with annotations like temporal collapse avoided and interbeat anomaly sustained. Eli read it one evening while trying to coax sleep from a half pillow and a back spasm. "I'm not a paradox," he muttered. "I'm just out of shape and full of cortisol." The translation band rendered it. Subject remains dynamically erratic under non-lethal stress. Close enough. Day 16. Calix approached with what looked like a toaster attached to a garden hose. "This is a phase-mapped neural interpreter," she said, placing it gently on a rolling tray. "We'd like to observe your dream cycle patterns." Eli stared at it. "What happened to just asking me what I dreamed about?" "We cannot observe time when you sleep." "I'm not doing time things, I just sleep weird." "But your heart still beats, with pauses, because that's normal for me." Calix blinked slowly. "Even in sleep?" "Especially in sleep. If it doesn't pause, I wake up sweating and scared. It's called anxiety." Kisht, behind her, whispered. "The entity fears the silence vanishing." Eli pointed at him. "No, not helping." By the start of week 3, the sling came off. Melior guided gentle shoulder rotations. The pain was sharp, but manageable. His strength was low, but improving. She allowed half lifts with a soft, resistant strap. He could lift his arm halfway before the ache returned. "I feel like a marionette with a broken string," he said one afternoon, flexing his fingers slowly. "That metaphor suggests you are not in control of your limbs." "I'm not right now." "You are. You simply must relearn their motion." He didn't answer. Because it was true. Kisht began bringing data slates of other species. He showed Eli the cardiac rhythm of a Crinari, like a hummingbird, constant motion. Then a Lironian one long, slow pulse that lasted minutes. Then the Threnari, perfect, undisturbed frequency. "Do all humans have this fragmented heart?" Eli nodded. "Pretty much. And yet you function." "Barely. Have you met us?" "But you operate machines. You fly. You build. You war. You love." "Mostly we try not to screw things up." Kisht stared, then wrote, "Subject claims ignorance as evolutionary strategy." One day, while attempting a slow elliptical walk around the medbay with a handheld grip, Eli stumbled. Just a misstep. His shoulder tensed wrong. The grip twisted. He dropped the strap and cursed. 2 medics were at his side in seconds. His vitals flared. He waved them off. panting. I'm okay. Just startled myself. Calyx, who had been standing nearby, froze mid-step. Your heart, she said, staring at the monitor, entered phase acceleration, then dropped. Why? I panicked. But without reason. Panic doesn't need reason. But it disrupts your time. No, it disrupts my rhythm. There's a difference. The next day, he found a holopad left by his bedside. It showed overlapping graphs, emotional spikes, and heart rhythm changes. A new theory was attached: emotive chronodisplacement. Humans may navigate time via feelings rather than events. Eli rolled his eyes so hard he saw stars. By week 4, he could lift his arm to shoulder height without pain. Still tender. Still sore. But moving. His sleep improved. He could lie flat now, and Melior cleared him for short climbs in the assisted recovery ladder module. Recovery was slow, boring, and dignified only by Quiche's daily philosophical intrusions. If a human heart stops between beats, he asked once, and no one counts it, does it still resume? Eli didn't even respond. But later, he said, you know that pause between beats? That's where the stress lives. That's where we think about bills and breakfast and ex-girlfriends. Quiche nodded. A pocket of compressed meaning. No, a pocket of regret and snacks. He quoted that in his thesis. By now, the medship had shifted position to orbit the next survey site, and Calyx had arranged for Eli's stay to be extended while the recovery program continued. Command back home agreed. He wasn't combat fit yet, and the idea of putting him back in a cockpit when he couldn't lift his arm overhead was laughable. But what surprised him most was how much the Threnari had softened. They no longer whispered about time fractures. They no longer winced at his pulse. Instead, they listened. Kish still believed Eli was a temporal ripple in disguise, but now it was said with admiration, not fear. You live despite chaos, Calyx told him one evening as they reviewed his telemetry together. You walk through fragmented time as if it were solid ground. Eli stared at the screen. He didn't feel like someone walking through anything. He felt tired, stiff, still scared sometimes when he woke up too fast and remembered the crash. He was just surviving. But maybe that was the point. 3 weeks and 5 days after the crash, Eli stood unaided in front of a wide mirror in the medbay's physical rehab wing. His skin was pale, too pale, but the swelling around his shoulder had finally reduced enough for the bones to sit properly under the skin again. There was still a faint bruising under his ribs, yellow now, instead of the angry purple from earlier, a healing badge of sorts. He raised his arm slowly, stopping just short of vertical. No pop, no sharp twinge. Just tightness and a dull pressure that reminded him he still had more work to do. Almost, Melior said, watching from her console. You are meeting projection benchmarks. Does that mean I get my ship back? Absolutely not. He exhaled, half amusement, half fatigue. Didn't think so. The medbay had grown familiar, but never comfortable. He was grateful. He hated being grateful. Calyx requested a formal data session 2 days later. Not an exam, a presentation. It came with an audience: 6 Threnari medical officers, 2 techs, and 1 confused janitorial unit who wandered in and was too polite to leave. They gathered in the research hall, lights low, holo display bright. Eli, now cleared to stand and speak for up to 30 minutes, leaned against a stabilizer bar near the display. He wore a loose gray uniform the Threnari had tailored to human form, 1 size too big. His right arm was functional again, though overhead range was still a few weeks off. He tapped at the holo interface with care. This, he began, gesturing to the ECG projection, is what we call normal sinus rhythm. A typical human ECG trace scrolled across the display. Sharp P wave, a QRS complex, a gentle T wave, regular, spaced. Each of those spikes is a heartbeat. The pause between is not failure, it's part of the cycle. Calyx watched, hands folded. Now this, Eli said, pulling up another trace, is under stress, elevated heart rate, shortened intervals. Quiche leaned forward. You condense your time under pressure? No, our heartbeats get closer. We don't. We stay in real time. But you move faster. Sort of. Adrenaline speeds things up. Perception can change. Reaction time too. But we're not skipping time. We're just panicking better. There was a moment of silence as a tech raised a small claw. You regulate this with substances? Caffeine, meds, breathing techniques, also sometimes just yelling into a pillow. Kisht wrote, crisis vocalization may recalibrate human time awareness. Eli didn't correct him. After the session, a small discussion circle formed around Calyx. The neurologists were intrigued, of course, but it was the engineers who were buzzing now. One asked if humans could be used as temporal distortion sensors. Another proposed they install a human on board their long-range scouts to help detect gravitational time dilation through subjective cardiac interpretation. Eli stared at them. You want to strap me to the dashboard and watch if I get nervous? A tech responded, yes. You demonstrate biologically what our instruments calculate theoretically. It is elegant. It's insane. Same meaning. Despite the madness, Eli was recovering. He could jog now, lightly. He could lift his arm fully, albeit with a minor ache on extension. His ribs only protested when he twisted too fast or laughed too hard, which Kisht unintentionally caused daily. The Threnary hadn't stopped treating him like a mystery, but at least it wasn't the terrifying kind anymore. Calyx gave him more autonomy. He had a datapad now, access to a section of the ship's common corridor, a med pass that let him get snacks without an escort. The first time he made it to the view deck and looked down at the moon that had almost killed him, he stood there for 10 full minutes. Why return to the scene? Melior asked, finding him there. I didn't crash into this medship. I crashed into that rock. If I'm going to fly again, I have to stop flinching at it. 1. A confrontation with the source. More like showing it I'm still alive. That night, Eli dreamed of engines sputtering and gravity reversing. He woke breathless, heart pounding. The monitor beside his bed chirped as his pulse surged past 130. Kisht, who had taken to sleeping in the observation lab for reasons no one questioned anymore, arrived 3 minutes later with a blanket and what he claimed was a calming tea. It smells like burnt algae, Eli muttered. It slows time. It slows me. Kisht blinked. Same meaning. Calyx's second theory paper dropped at the end of week 5. Adaptive chrono-instability, a model for resilience in human biological systems. This one had footnotes from Eli, real ones. He explained things like sinus arrhythmia, how breathing in could cause the heart to beat faster, and exhaling slowed it. Why exercise strengthened variable responses. Why panic attacks weren't anomalies, just overclocked reactions. Calyx added annotations like, unstable rhythm is not a defect, it is adaptive stochasticism. She quoted Eli. The pause isn't broken, it's the space we use to catch up. The paper went consortium-wide. Suddenly, other medships started transmitting questions. Some requested ECG comparisons. A few asked if other humans were available for similar studies. One species asked if they could borrow Eli. That request was denied with great formality. By week 6, the clearance came through. Eli was fit for light duty. He wouldn't pilot yet, but he could consult, navigate, monitor telemetry. His ship had been junked, of course, but Command offered him reassignment aboard a deep-range cruiser. He hadn't said yes yet. Instead, he stood in Calyx's lab one evening, watching old playback from the crash site. The wreckage. The slow extraction. I should have died, he said softly. With that shoulder? If you'd pulled too hard, or if my lung had collapsed. Calyx stood beside him. You endured because you adapted to the unknown. We treat anomalies as threats. You treat them as routines. I wouldn't call a dislocated shoulder routine. No, but surviving it while your own heart argued with time is exceptional. He snorted, still just breathing. Yes, but in your case, even that teaches us something. The next morning, Eli visited the medbay one last time. He thanked Melior for her patience, her quiet corrections, her insistence on movement even when he didn't want to move. He found Kisht in the observation dome, watching a hollow loop of Earth's weather systems. I want to visit, Kisht said. Why? To see how your world survives in constant entropy. Wind, water, fire, politics. Porta gradum mor per for. We barely survive any of those. Exactly. Yet you persist, and your heart continues. Pause and all. Eli looked out at the stars beyond. Kisht hesitated. Will you miss us? He didn't answer right away. Then, yeah, I will. Before boarding the cruiser, Calyx approached him at the dock. "We have no ceremony for what you've taught us," she said. "No way to honor a being who does not obey the laws we thought universal." "I disobey a lot of laws. This was just biology." She stepped closer. For a Threnari, it was almost intimate. "Your kind walks through fractured time, as if it were a garden path. We do not understand how." Eli smiled faintly, tugging his jacket around the still sensitive shoulder. "We don't either, that's sort of the trick." Calyx tilted her head. "Then may you always find balance between beats." He turned, stepping into the waiting shuttle. And somewhere in the silence between footsteps, his heart paused and beat again. The Narrow's dawn wasn't elegant. It creaked when it powered up, rattled slightly when its starboard wing cooled unevenly, and had the kind of dim interior lighting that made every corridor feel like an afterthought. It wasn't a fighter or a scout, it was a deep-range diplomatic cruiser, long and quiet, meant for long missions and polite standoffs. Eli took to it faster than he expected. They assigned him a small cabin near the communications array. His new post wasn't glamorous, systems liaison and human culture advisor to a rotating Threnari ambassadorial team. No piloting yet. That would come later, maybe. For now, he was a passenger with a purpose. The first week felt surreal. No medical beds, no whispered debates about his pulse, no interns timing his heartbeat like they were charting ripples in space-time. Just a new ship, a rotating Threnari crew, and a whole lot of quiet. Too quiet. His first night aboard, he woke with his chest tight, lungs straining. It wasn't pain, just the kind of subtle fear that sneaks in when the world's too still. He sat up slowly, pressing fingers to his wrist, counting. Thump. Waited. Thump. Still there. But his heart raced anyway, not because of anything wrong, but because he kept expecting someone to burst in and tell him time had stopped again. He got up, wandered the hallway barefoot, until he found the observation port. Stars blinked outside like 1,000 tiny mistakes, or 1,000 tiny corrections. He stared until his shoulders loosened, until the pause between beats stopped sounding like an accusation. He exhaled. Then again. Breathe in. Wait. Let it go. Calyx sent a message 3 days into the journey. It contained no greeting, just a single line. The pause is no longer feared. Attached was a recording from the medbay on the Doran. The Threnari were now training with human cardiac rhythm simulations, learning to tolerate the idea of a variable pulse. Kisht had apparently become a kind of strange celebrity. His field notes, titled Fragments Within Harmony, were being reviewed for publication. One excerpt was read aloud in the recording. "To the Threnari, time is a thread. To the human, it is wind. Uncatchable, often inconvenient, but always moving. Always alive." Eli laughed when he heard that. Because, yes, that was about right. Midway through the mission, he was invited to a diplomatic session between the Threnari and a species known as the Veroln, a cold-blooded aquatic race who communicated in pulse patterns. Eli was there strictly as an observer. But halfway through the session, a Veroln delegate stopped speaking mid-pulse. He stared directly at Eli. "This human," he said through the translator. He echoes. Calyx, who had transferred temporarily to serve as liaison for the Veroln, looked to Eli. "Explain?" The Veroln delegate moved closer. His rhythm. It is not artificial, but it is wrong. Beautifully wrong. A cascade of uncertain notes. "It's just my heartbeat," Eli said, a bit self-conscious now. The Veroln delegate pulsed rapidly. "You are music that forgets itself, then remembers." He placed a delicate fin against Eli's chest. No pressure, just a gesture. "You stop," the delegate whispered. "And yet you continue." Eli didn't know what to say. But Calyx, smiling faintly in that barely perceptible Threnari way, said, "That is the nature of humanity." On the 42nd day aboard Naros Dawn, Eli got his first unsupervised workout clearance. Low impact at first, cautious. He strapped into the resistance rig, adjusted the tension, and lifted. The shoulder resisted, but it moved. No spikes of pain, just deep muscle pull and tightness. The ribs twinged as he rotated, but not enough to stop. He could feel his own pulse in his ears again, not panicked, not erratic, just active. Melior would have called it progress. Kisht would have called it a calibration of the temporal interface. Eli called it finally. He finished the workout and sat for a long time in the stretch zone, water pouch in hand, head tilted back. He felt ordinary again. And for a man who had once been called a time fragment in a pressure suit, ordinary felt miraculous. Later that evening, he gave a talk. Not officially, not scheduled, just a spontaneous session in the common lounge where a few crew members gathered each night to discuss philosophy, physics, or whatever passed for entertainment. Eli was nudged into it by a bored Thranari tech who asked, "If your heartbeat is chaos, how do you survive your own biology?" So he stood, rubbing his shoulder absent-mindedly, and started talking. "We don't survive it, we live it. The pause between beats isn't a flaw, it's space. That space gives us room to think, to feel, to wait. Every moment we hesitate is a chance to choose." Someone from the back asked, "But it could stop?" "Yeah," Eli replied. "That's what makes the next beat matter." There was silence. Then Kalix spoke softly. "You have changed the way we see time." Eli shook his head. "No, you just started listening differently." On the final day of the mission cycle, the cruiser docked at a rotating station near Consortium core space. It was bustling hundreds of species, thousands of microcultures, all moving with their own rhythms. Some pulsed continuously, some fluctuated in tidal waves, some moved so slowly they seemed still. Eli walked through it all, unnoticed, blending in for the first time in months. He stopped by a local cafe, a real one, or close enough, and tried something approximating coffee. It tasted terrible. He smiled anyway. His wristband pinged an incoming message. "Kalix again. You walk between beats. Not despite the pause, but because of it." He typed back, "You guys write a lot of poetry for scientists." A pause. Then, "We're learning." Eli stood at the edge of the station's upper observatory that night, watching the streaks of passing cruisers in silent arcs against the stars. He wasn't healed completely. Not yet. The shoulder still stiffened in the morning, his ribs ached when he coughed, sleep came in waves. But his heart kept beating. Thump. Wait. Thump. No alarm, no crisis, just the sound of something alive. Behind him, the crowd moved on. Rhythms upon rhythms. And Eli, standing alone in the quiet between pulses, smiled faintly at the absurdity of it all. He had crashed. He had survived. And he had taught an entire species that even in the pauses, especially in the pauses, there was life.